Hi guys, good evening. Thanks for joining. Tim, how you doing?
Yeah, hi, good to see you. It's nice to see so many people logged in and waiting for our webinar tonight.
Cool. Well, what else is better to do on a Wednesday night when it's cold and rainy? So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I think we still got a few people to join. I think we had over 100 people register in the end. So yeah, there's a few late joiners, I'm sure. But we'll get started slowly. A bit about me, a bit about Tim. So I think the key to understand is how much experience between the two of us, which makes us sound quite old, but you're only as old as you feel and all of that. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing this, it says over 15 years. I mean, I think it's actually closer to 20 years now that I've been in financial services, and specifically in commercial property finance for at least the last decade, and development finance as well. So, and it was a few years ago that we came up with the idea of creating Brickflow, which is primarily to allow people to get better access to development finance. So, you know, there's no sourcing systems, there's no comparison websites like there are for many other well-known financial products. So Brickflow was created with the intention of making it easier for people to access, which is for the benefit of anyone in the sort of development industry. Tim, do you want to explain who you are, introduce yourself?
So again, says up there 25 years, it's probably more like 35 years. I've been a lender all my life. Started off in the high street, Barclays Bank, but when I was late 20s, I joined a bank to specialise in providing development finance, and that's all I've done ever since. I've worked for a number of the major players in the London market, the specialist lenders, not the clearing banks, and it's been a joy to lend across the UK. I gave it up when COVID struck, not because of COVID, it was just a timely event that triggered a change of career. Ian invited me to assist to be the lender liaison on the Brickflow platform, which is basically to keep in tune with the lender criteria, looking at propositions from a lender's perspective, but to also impart the knowledge that I have of loan applications to developers so that they get the best chance of success, giving the lender what they want to hear and keeping the lender from what they don't want to hear. So inside story, really.
Yeah. So there you go, guys. You got over 50 years, maybe even 55 years worth of experience and knowledge that we're here to share with you this evening. So this is what we're going to cover. We've got the capital stack, why cheap development finance is a false economy, second charges and additional security, leveraging the planning process, deferred land payments, overages, and how phasing could help you to scale your business more quickly. Just want to introduce Brickflow. I mean, hopefully most people on here are aware of us. You're on our database. That's why you've been invited this evening. But I mean, our core reason for being is helping developers do more with less, and helping the advisors of developers do the same. So we want developers to get the best value funding out there. You know, it personally really upsets me when you speak to people who've, you know, been ripped off is probably too strong a word, but they, you know, their lack of knowledge and perhaps the lack of transparency in the market has meant they've overpaid. And you can overpay in two ways. You can either be paying too much in terms of your costs, so your arrangement fees, your interest rates, but probably the biggest thing we see is what I've talked about there in point 3 is inefficient equity deployment. So if you look at Brickflow, and we'll just have a quick look at it in a second, you'll see when you quote across, every lender calculates loans differently. So you'll see when you actually look across the market on a, you know, fairly modest development loan, you know, circa 5 million of lending, the difference between the lender who's going to lend you the most amount in the market versus someone that's at the midpoint, it translates to hundreds of thousands. So if you're speaking to the lender at the midpoint in the market, you're going to have to find maybe 200, 300,000 and sometimes more. I mean, we've seen schemes where people have come to us and said, look, my lender has offered me this, what can you do? And we've decreased their deposit by more than £1 million. So, you know, there's not small numbers that we're talking here. And all it takes is a search of the market to really get good value. And the real, you know, one of the main benefits that will come about by this method of sourcing finance is cheaper funding. So, you know, the lenders go into a tender process. We'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But what it also means for a lender, and Tim can maybe pick up on this as well, but when you're a lender, and we ask the lenders before they come onto the platform, how many loan inquiries do you get for every loan you complete? And it's about 1 in 25. So 96% of the inquiries they get don't go anywhere. And as a lender, I mean, that must be incredibly frustrating just to look at, you know, 96% of your inbox is just a complete waste of time. But the point here is that with Brickflow, because we're doing the search of criteria, the algorithm is only presenting you with lenders that match your loan criteria, that the lenders are only getting inquiries that they can finance. So, you know, the 24 they can't finance or they're not the most competitive on, they don't tend to see. So the results they get from us, the inquiries they get from us are definitely things that they can do. And then it's just a case of whether they can do it at the right price and the right leverage point for the borrower. But the key point is that for a Brickflow lend or Brickflow inquiry, a lender can get comfortable with it and offer terms within about 20 to 30 minutes. Whereas you speak to a lender, Barclays, I remember having this conversation with them a couple of weeks ago. They're saying that normally when they get an inquiry, it takes them 2 or 3 weeks to get the right information to then make a decision, which is probably no, we can't do it. And so
I've just written that exact sentence down there. Not only does 1 in 25 meet their criteria, it takes them 2 weeks to find out that it doesn't meet their criteria, having gone backwards and forwards to the client and the broker to get the bit of information that can tip it over. So frustrating.
And I think that's the point, is if it's cheaper for lenders to source loans and then they can offer cheaper funding, and cheaper funding is better for everyone because it means more houses get built. You know, schemes at the moment that are marginal can get built if the funding is cheaper. So it unlocks housing, cheaper funding unlocks housing. And that's really what we want to try and do here, is this, you know, this quicker way of sourcing funding, making sure you get the best deal each time will be to lenders' benefits, but to borrowers and to, you know, society as a whole. You know, if we can build more houses and solve the housing crisis, you know, it's only good for all of us. I'll just go back a slide because that's our first slide on the capital stat. But what I just wanted to do, Tim, tell me if I'm sharing my page. Can you see Brickflow here?
Yeah, 1 to 5. Yeah, introducing Brickflow. I can't see a Brickflow.
I can't see it. Okay, let me just see if I can do that. How do I change my screen?
While Ian's looking, I was just saying that you're coming up. The lenders. I worked for a lender. We used to label, tab every deal that came in. It went to pages and pages. That's better, Ian. We used to cross them off after a month to go, well, it's not going anywhere. The client gets a deal in front of our lender panel through Brickflow. The platform delivers it to the lender of your choice. He's got exactly what he needs to make a decision that day. Some of our lenders come back within hours. Some take, an afternoon. Some take 24 hours. But it's an instant decision because they've got all the information in front of them to make that decision.
Okay, so we'll move on to the meat of the session in a second. But if you haven't seen the platform before, just a quick tour here. Basically, this is the search part. So you put in details about the property, your build costs, your GDV, how long it's going to take you to build, etc., and how you're going to exit, so sell or refinance. and you hit search loans and your loan results come up here. Okay, so we've got 1 to 20. We showed the top 20. There's 35 lenders on the platform, but we only showed the top 20. And as you can see here, this is the deposit, this is the profit forecast. So we rank in order of who's going to give you the biggest loan. So you'll see the biggest loan here is also quite expensive, but as you come down, you can start to see the slightly better value. So you might argue that this one is probably the best loan on the platform because it's reasonably cheap, 0.57% as a true cost per month. So that is worked out by adding arrangement fee, exit fee, and interest rate. That 0.57 is a good rate. As you scan down here, you can see there's not many below 0.57. There's a couple at 0.56. So you've got a very good rate. But also, you know, a very good size of deposit that's needed. And this is for a cert. We've also got all the criteria here for each lender. So you can start to see their minimum loan, the max loan. This is quite a good one a bit further down. So if you see max loan to GDV, 70%, day one LTV cap, 60%. The next one, minimum percentage of total equity from Maine borrowers. What that means is, what is the lender's view on investor money? So this one, they only want 25% from the borrower, which means 75% could come from other sources. So 75% of that 1.3 million could come from investors. You select your up to 5 lenders. So I'll just do that now quickly. So let's select these 5. I then proceed through to the project appraisal section of the platform, which is where I complete the information a lender needs to make a credit decision. That when I'm ready, so once I've completed all of these modules, I can also add any supporting documents. Once I've completed those, then just go to that. Request a review comes live. That comes to one of us in the office, and we come on, we log on, we check through the case, make sure that we're happy with it. You haven't said anything silly. If there's information that should be on there that's not, we'll tell you to add it. And then that gets sent to all 5 of those lenders you saw on the previous screen, and they're asked to make their best bid. So it's a competitive tender process. It works really nicely. Lenders know they're in a tender process, so they come back quickly and they come back with the best result. So that's the platform. Let's not go on too much more about that. We'll go into what our session is about today.
Yeah, the PowerPoint at the bottom there.
So
the little orange button there.
Where are we? Okay. So so first on the menu, capital stack. Okay, so some people might think they know this, and some of you might, but there's a lot of people actually get confused by this. And the capital stack is debt and equity. Okay, so as you can see here on the left-hand side, senior debt is kind of at the bottom. That's the cheapest price. You have stretch senior, which will go a little bit higher, sort of almost blending together senior and mezz. And then you have standalone mezz debt, which will sit above one of these. This is a second charge. And then equity is what sits above mezzanine. So mezzanine typically will go to 90% loan to cost and or 75% loan to GDV. So anything above that will typically be equity. And equity will either be your own cash or money that you borrow from investors. Okay. Generally, the higher you go up the stack, the more expensive it gets. So stretch senior is more expensive than senior, mezz is more expensive than stretch senior, and equity is generally more expensive than mezz. So the idea is to maximize each level before you go up to the next level. Okay, and you know we'll speak to people who will come to us and say, I've got a fantastic rate from a high street bank. Let's call them Bat West, and they'll say we've got 5% as our interest rate. Great, well done, fantastic. But they're asking 30% deposit, and you ask them where they're getting that money from? And more often than not, the answer is, well, I've got half of it and I'm borrowing half of it from someone else, and I'm giving them a 40% profit share. Now, that is a terrible way to structure your finance, because actually that is a lot more expensive than using a lender who's going to charge 7%, but is only going to want 10% of the equity. Because in the scenario I've just painted there, that person could meet the 10% fully by themselves rather than going to an investor. So debt is always cheaper than equity. That's what we sort of say internally. So that's in terms of both the financial cost, but also the opportunity cost. So every developer will always be offered deals when they haven't got any money. And so if you're putting all your money into each deal, you'll always miss out on opportunities. And what I've highlighted here is, I don't know if he's on the call this evening, Gary, but this is a real life example of somebody who I remember speaking to a few months back, who had put £2 million into a scheme. He got caught by COVID. Literally is everything he had. His costs overrun. He had to find more money, borrow family, friends, etc. But it put him in a really bad situation. And what had happened, as he quite sort of rightly acknowledged, is he chased the rate. And so he'd put everything into this deal, and actually put him and his family at a lot of financial risk just to get a good rate. And actually, when we went through the numbers on Brickflow, he realized that he actually could have done it with 700,000. And yes, he would have paid a bit more for the debt, but he had 3 or 4 golden opportunities that he had to pass in the 2 years he was in this deal, or pass on, because he didn't have any money. And now he's in a situation where he sold that scheme. He's got money in the bank, but he's going to be out of the cycle now for about a year, because he didn't have any money to, buy a site that needed to work through planning, or be looking at other sites whilst he was finishing the previous site. So it's key for developers to have money to hand, because that's how you want to work your process. You want to have one scheme that you're in, maybe just starting, one you're just finishing, and then maybe 2 that are various different stages of planning. And that's how the most successful developers will work. And you can't do that if you put in all your equity into one deal.
Ian,
so yes,
you're maybe you're scrolling with your mouse, but it's making a loud noise.
Okay.
That tapping noise, like a plasticky noise, is coming out loud above your speaking.
Okay. Let me.
No, yeah.
Is that better?
That sounds good. If one of the attendees has just raised it, that was all, and I could hear it. That is better.
All right, I've taken my headphones out. Hopefully it gets a bit better.
That's lovely.
And I've put down here at the bottom, MES goes in before senior. The reason I've said that is we speak to people sometimes and they go, oh yeah, I only, let's get some MES. And they'll say, well, I only need it right at the end, like the last 2 months. That's not how it works. The MES goes in before the senior. So the MES will be drawn for the entire loan. So your equity goes in, then the MES, then the senior. So you're not going to borrow the MES, the top up bit, the extra 5–10% you need just for 2 or 3 months. You borrow it for the entire loan.
Yeah. And just to explain that, that's because each lender wants to fund the cost of build. What he provides on towards the purchase or the land loan is what's left by default. It's not a round amount. So because the senior lender is funding all of the build and all of the interest and all the fees, he wants your money, and in this case the MES money, to go in first. So the MES money goes in first and it's repaid last. But very expensive, because that money is going to be out the longest and it's the most expensive part of the stack.
Well, other than equity, which could obviously, if you're borrowing from investors, could be, profit payaways, but also, as we just discussed, opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of having all your money tied up in one scheme. So this kind of follows on from that previous point. So across the industry, deposits vary from 10% to 35% of total costs. And total cost is all the project costs, so land, build, but also the funding costs as well. Okay, so on a scheme of costs of 5 million, the required deposit could be anything from 500,000 to 1.75 million. So it's a huge difference. Most people do not have 1.25 million of cash down the back of the sofa. So, you know, if you want to move up, and we see this quite often, people borrow, you know, with mainstream lenders or, you know, lenders that are a bit more conservative, you know, they don't really get any further. They kind of just do the same sort of size schemes, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, they might be happy doing that, but no, the majority of people do actually want to progress and go to bigger schemes or run multiple schemes at the same time. And the key here is if you're being asked to put in 30-35% each time, you're going to really struggle to graduate up to bigger schemes. So this is an example just of some numbers. So a site with combined land and build costs of 6 million, GDV is 9 million, build term is 12 months, our loan term is 18 months, so we've got 6 months to sell. We've got 2 developers, both have 1 million of equity each, okay? So developer 1 borrows from a high profile high street lender, rate is good at 5%, but he needs, she needs 2.1 million in equity to get the scheme off the ground. Developer has 1 million, as we've said, and finds 1.1 million from investors, but they're paying a profit share. It's 10% coupon or interest rate, and 40% of the profit is being paid away. And that will always normally be before the developer gets their profit. So you normally find an investor will be on a priority return, i.e. their money gets paid out before you. So if the GDV falls or build costs go up, they're protected, you're not. Lender costs of 500,000, so that takes total project costs to 6.5 million. So our profit is 2.5 million. I mean, the numbers are really good on this scheme, but they're probably not realistic. But it highlights the point. The investors are due 1 million, which is 40% of the 2.5, and 100k in interest, which is their 10% interest on the loan. So they get 100% of their money back, or 100% return on their money. They put 1.1 in, they get 1.1 back, and they've not done anything. Okay, great deal for them. Developer earns pre-tax profit of 1.5 million in 18 months, which is phenomenal. Like, that's not to be grumbled at. Really, really good. You know, more than doubled their money. Great deal. Developer 2 searches the entire market and finds a different lender. Rate is higher, 7.5%, but the deposit is only 600,000. Okay, no investor needed, no profit share. Debt cost is higher, 300,000 higher. It's 800,000 this time. So our total costs are now 6.8 million. So the profit falls to 2.2 million, but that's all for the developer. There's no profit share on this deal. So the developer has earned £700,000 more than the other developer over the same period. They've also got 400,000 left in the tank. So back to our previous point, never put all of your equity in, because there's always going to be other opportunities. And they're able to run a smaller scheme at the same time, and that earns them another £1 million. So developer 2 earns 3.2 million over 18 months, 2 years, however long it takes, versus developer 1 who's only managed to, I say only, but is 1.5 million. But the difference is the first person has just gone to their local bank, the bank they've used all the time. The second person actually knows the market, understands how to structure deals, hopefully has used Brickflow as well, and they've managed to source the better way of doing things. And the key here is if both of these developers go through the cycle 3, 4, 5 times, over a 10-year period, the second developer, is going to be miles ahead of the first developer in terms of the size of deals that they can do, the sort of profit that they will have, the capital that they have to work with to mobilize new schemes. So it is a huge benefit to anybody who actually understands how to structure these deals. It's a huge competitive advantage over any other developer. Second charge is an additional security. So what we're talking about here is where you use make-weight security. So if you haven't got the cash, but you have got background properties, be they commercial or buy-to-let, and let's say we've had a few examples recently of people who've got big buy-to-let portfolios. They've got these historic low lifetime tracker rates from pre-financial crash, which are base plus 1%. So they don't want to forego those rates. They're sitting at 30-40% loan to value because of the uplift in value of the properties. but they want to access the equity. And the way you can do that is by offering a lender a second charge over a property. So let's say, round numbers, £1 million deposits needed. You might put 500 of that in cash, and 500 might come from second charges against other properties. So this is a really good way for you to sweat your background assets. You will get charged interest against the second charge element. If you have cash available, cash is probably going to be cheaper. But again, it's a way of you being able to maximise your balance sheet to get you into development schemes and get you perhaps into bigger or multiple development schemes. I've just talked about here a second charge revolving credit facility. We actually did this not so long ago for a gentleman where we took a charge over 11 buy-to-let properties. And there was a £3 million effectively overdraft revolving credit facility, which he could draw at any time against these 11 properties. It sat second to all of the first charge mortgages. So great, exactly what I talked about a second ago. 1% plus base on these base rate trackers at 25-30% loan to value. Wanted the equity, and this was the way to access it. He's now being able to buy development sites 100% leverage. He's not putting any of his own cash in. The cash is being raised against the second charge. It's going into the development. We're raising a development loan, and once the development loan once the development finishes, he refinances or sells the development and repays that second charge. So, not everyone's in this fortunate position, but if you have business partners and you yourself have background assets, then these are things that you can leverage. Tim, anything to add?
No, it's often something that me as a lender overlooks. It's the client needs cash, but he's got assets, he's just not got the cash. The assets all have values. We've got a lot of lenders that say, well, what else has he got? If he's got something else, and the Brickflow notes will show you this guy these lenders will lend against first or second charge on something else in lieu of cash. But each lender has different criteria, so you need to check which ones will and which won't.
Yeah, so in the notes against each product, which we just showed you on the platform, it actually has that information, so you'll be able to work out whether that's available with the lender that you want to select. Leveraging the planning process, so sweat equity as it's affectionately known. It won't surprise you that every lender takes a slightly different view with this. And what we've done in the platform is built in a sort of sweat equity rule that every lender has agreed to, that offers it as a product. But there are nuances to it. But the key differences are some lenders will lend loan to cost, some will lend loan to value once you've added the value. So if you buy a site under option, or you buy a site without planning permission, when you've taken it through the planning permission, you would have added value. And some lenders will look at that value and give you a loan against the value. Others will look at the cost that you've spent and they'll only loan against that. That's obviously disadvantageous if you're a developer, because you want the lender to take a view on the value, because that means more of your equity can come back to you. So buy a piece of land for £1 million, spend 250k on planning, the new value is 2 million. Some lenders will lend a percentage of the 1.25 million, others will lend against the 2 million. Lenders will always want to see some hurt money in, so that's circa 10% of total costs. A benefit of buying pre-planning comes if you need an investor. So you can repay your equity, your investor equity, when you raise the development finance for the build stage. You pay your investor a percentage of the profit on the value uplift during the planning process, not on the total profits at the end. So I've got an example here to put some numbers on that. So buy a property for £1 million. We take a net bridging loan at 70% LTV. So 300k deposit goes in, 200k in purchase costs and planning. So our total spend so far is 1.2. The developer splits the 500k deposit equally with an investor, and they agree a 70-30 profit share. 9 months later, planning permission is secured and the site is now worth 2 million. So it's 800k of profit. The investor is owed 250k, their original investment that was done up here, plus 240k profit share, which is 30% of 800. Developer is able to raise development finance of 1.25 million, which is 65% of 2 million. Where's my 2 million? There. And 100% of build costs. So 750 is used to pay back my bridge because I borrowed 700, but then I rolled up all my interest. So I've got 750 owed to the bridge. I then pay 490,000, 250 plus 240 to my investor. My 250 is still in the scheme. So I'm able to repay my investor after 9 months, meaning 100% of the 2 million profit that the scheme generates is mine at the end, rather than paying the investor 600,000 at the end. Yeah. So that's one way you can just be a bit clever, a bit cute with the planning process to redeem your investors a bit early if you are going to use investors. Deferred land payment. Did you want to take this on, Tim?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to comment on the last slide, which was basically we are aware. You were saying about lenders want to down the middle column 10% of total cost. It's very rare for a lender to lend you more than 100% of what you actually outlaid. But the caveat there is if there is a passage of time, and we have asked lenders, if the client has done all this, but he's had it more than 3 years, they will take a better view of the uplift in value rather than you bought it and last year and this year it's doubled in value. They can see what you paid for it. But if you've held it for a long time, or you've inherited it, or you've worked it, and they will lend a lot more as a percentage of value than they would on a profit that's been made in the short term.
They generally won't allow equity release, but 100% of costs is possible if you've owned it for a long time.
Yeah.
Yes. Deferred land payment.
Yeah. So deferred land generally is a good way of raising equity because you're talking to the vendor. You say, well, I'll pay you $1 million for the site. But how about I give you 800 now and 300,000 at a later point, generally after the units are sold, because that's when you're going to be in cash. So the vendor thinks, you know what, I don't really need the money right now. 1.1 is better than 1 million. I'll go with that deal. So basically, you're paying 800 for a site that's worth $1 million. Your lender's offering you, say, 60% of the land. He's offering you 600. So he's actually lending you. He's 75% of what you're paying. It's only 60% of the land. So you've got 200 grand of cash in, gifted equity, gifted deposit, which you don't need to raise. The downside, I suppose, is that you're paying 100 grand of your profit away because you're paying 100 grand more than you would have done if you'd have paid $1 million now. But it's what works for you. The advantages to the vendor. He might not want $1 million all in one tax year. He might want it in 2 tax years. So it's good for him. And he gets more than a straight sale. The downside to the vendor, and it's not really our problem, the downside, what if the developer isn't successful and he doesn't get his money back and he doesn't get the extra money? But that's for the vendor's look out. But the advantages to the developer is the vendor might take his offer because actually everyone else is offering $1 million. He's offering 1.1, albeit deferred. He might be the preferred buyer at that point. He's got less cash in the deal, but he is giving away some of his profit. So that's the vendor. The problem we lenders, I have to still say we lenders have, is that the vendor wants to know that his deferred consideration is secured and invariably will ask to take a charge on the property. Clearly, he can't take a first charge because that would affect the purchaser's ability to raise the development finance. So he can't insist on a first charge. He can't seek repayment ahead of the lender either because the lender wants its money back before the second charge. So normally they take a second charge behind the lender. The lender will want what's known in the trade as an intercreditor deed, which gives the lender the right to lend that money, that fund the development and also the right to fund perhaps cost overruns. If the vendor puts a cap on their first charge, the lender can't lend any more money if they had to. So the lender would seek to have a gap, or maybe a 20% cost overrun clause in this intercreditor deed. And the intercreditor deeds are really heavily negotiated at times, and it's something you've got to consider. The downside to the vendor, again, the lender normally would like an unlimited priority, so it could the lender could fund more than the vendor was expecting, leaving less for the profit and surplus cash for the vendor. But we're talking today about the benefits of raising equity. It's a great way of raising equity because the developer, the purchaser, does not have to pay the full price, and you get the development period to pay back. So you're raising less and you're paying less in charges.
I think the key thing, like it very much helps here if you're direct to the vendor, or the agent allows you to sort of have dialogue with the vendor, because there are some sort of trip points, if you like, as Tim's highlighted, which if they're not discussed and got out in the open early on, then you might find that it's on, it's all agreed, and then it gets to the solicitor, the vendor solicitor, and he says, did you know this, and did you know this, and then you perhaps get somebody who goes a bit cold. But yeah, definitely something we've done multiple times on the platform, and something lenders are generally happy with. One point really was that if it's fully deferred, then, as we said in the previous slide, the lender wants to see some skin in the game, as they call it. They want to see some cash from the developer, so they won't accept a full deferral. They won't give 100%, but invariably the vendor wants something, if only moving costs or just some holiday money. The vendor will want some cash to make him feel good if he's deferring his payment. Yeah.
So the other,
cool, mate.
No, I was going to say the next slide is the other
overage.
The other one that often raises its head, which is the overage agreement. It's interesting, Ian's take on overage and the slide that he's produced, and perhaps my take. But this is one where the seller thinks his land's worth 2 million. He's been told by the estate agent it's worth 2 million. He hasn't realised the market's cooled off a bit and it's only worth 1.5. So he's holding out for 2. You've done your numbers. You only think it's worth 1.5, but you never know. The market's picking up, and so you say to the vendor, I can only give you 1.5 now, but tell you what, if I achieve better than I think I will, I'll give you that further money on the sales. So you're actually saying to him, you'll get your money. We won't pay you all of it now, but we'll pay you what we can, and we'll give you a bonus if I perform. The seller thinks he thinks that he'll get the proceeds over and above. So the developer, think you're going to make 4.5 million on the resales. You could make 5. So you say to the guy, look, it's 8 houses. If I achieve over 4.5 million, I'm not going to give you 100% of any of the proceeds over and above 4.5 million, because there's no incentive for me to sell these houses for any more. I'll just knock them out 4.5 and you can bugger off. But that's a technical term. But if you say to him, look, I'll give you 50% over anything over 4.5, I'll give you 50%. Both sides win. The guy's happy, he gets his cash, and the lawyers will draw that up. Again, it's about deferred consideration. It's a further bonus. It's a promise to pay something over and above the agreed price when certain events happen. For me personally, I always see overage in the planning situation. You agree to buy the site for 1 million with planning consent for 4 houses. The vendor thinks it's worth 1.5. He said, well, I'll tell you what, if I get planning for more than 4, I'll give you the extra. So that's the sort of the option. It's better for you to take an option if you want to make a real killing. Agree to pay the guy 1 million subject to planning for 4, and then go and get 8, and just give him 1 million. Anything above the million's a bonus. but the canny vendor, but you've got the cost of, why would you give him all the profit? You've got the cost of getting planning. Some purchasers would say, I'll give you 80% now. No, if we get planning and it's worth $1 million with planning, I'll give you 80% of the market value at that point, because I've spent a lot of money, time and effort to get the cost of planning. So that's the discount. So the things you've got to look at is when is that payment made? It can't. Is it paid on receipt of planning? Is it on the start of building? Generally, you'd want it to be on the sale of the completed houses. That's the time when you're in funds. You know what the result is. You know if you've overachieved, underachieved, and you can agree the structure for the profit. Effectively a profit share, but it's not. I don't think it's so much as an equity release, because you are paying what you think it's worth. It won't value. If you think it's worth 1.5, it won't value. So you'll only get your money based on that, but it is a deferred consideration. And it's more for the vendor to keep him sweet, enable you to buy a site that otherwise you'd have to let go because you can't make it stack up.
Cool. Okay. So, yeah, so it's similar to deferred land payment.
Yeah.
But requires an understanding of how to calculate residual land value. So we sort of gave you a quick tour on that last page. I think we've covered all of these points. I mean, this is quite common. You do see overages quite a lot. I think as Tim highlighted, perhaps more common in the planning. But what it does is it protects you as the buyer. So, I think agents and certainly vendors of land, if we're in a rising market, sometimes they'll say, well, look, it's going to take 2 years to build the thing. They're worth this today, but actually they could be worth another 500,000, these units in 2 years' time, because the market's so strong. Therefore, I want to base my purchase price on the 2-year future value. Now, obviously, if the market, there's a big correction or something like that, or like we've got at the moment, build costs going up astronomically, that beyond anyone's control, it's very difficult then for you to once you've contracted to purchase to actually keep a lid on things. So what the overage allows you to do is actually offset some of that risk. Phasing. Okay, so this is really a really good one. We've actually just done something on the platform for a borrower. Well, we've done two instances where clients have been able to, or borrowers have been able to graduate very, very quickly. And there's a case study on the website, actually. One of the guys said actually their business is 5 to 10 years further ahead than where they thought it would be, thanks to this phasing solution that we were able to come up with. So phasing, firstly, normally bigger schemes, multiple blocks of flats or multiple units, or units more than 20. It can be less than 20. Tim's working on one at the moment in the Midlands where I think it's 12, and that's phased. But they're big houses, they're all sort of exec houses. So our worked example here, so let's say we've got a development of 60 units with a GDV of 18 million, 300k per unit, build cost of 175k per unit. So that gives us our totals there. Land cost of 2.15, 2 million land purchase cost and 150k purchase costs, and then build term of 20 months, loan term of 30 months, so 10 months to sell. What I'm just going to do quickly here, because I've actually already loaded this onto Brickflow. So this is this search. So these are numbers that I just went through on the platform, on the presentation. And you can see that our my internet's been a bit slow. So you can see here what lenders will need. So deposit wise, we're looking at sort of 2.26, 2.4, up to sort of option 5, 2.7, nearly 2.8 million of deposit. Okay, so keep that figure in mind, and we'll nip back quickly to the presentation. Okay, so now if we break the site into two phases, so we've got 30 units, GDV of 9 million, build costs, I've literally halved them, 5.25, land cost of 1.15. So what I've done is I've split the land in two. So I'm splitting the title. The land cost is obviously still 2 million, but we'll come to that in a second. Build term of 10 months, loan term of 16 months, 6 months to sell. And again, if we go back to the platform, then this is the one we were looking at earlier. Then you'll see here, this is the size of deposit that you need. So 1.1 through to the fifth one, 1.42. Okay, so we're looking at before 2.4 up to 2.7. So straight away, our equity requirement is almost halved. Then we have, sorry, it's a bit clunky going between the two. So if we've got the land, let's say it's worth $1 million, the second phase, we can take a bridge against that piece of land and hold that for the duration of the phase one build. Yeah. So let's say we can borrow 70% gross. So let's say that's 60% net. So if it's worth $1 million, then we're actually looking at 400K deposit. So then if you go back to those numbers on the platform, we're looking at to acquire that scheme, a total of 1.1, I think was the top or smallest deposit, plus 400K, which is 1.5 million versus nearly 2.5 million if we try and buy the whole scheme in one go. So again, you know, some people will try and fund all in one go, and they'll tie up 2.5 million or $1 million more equity than they need to unnecessarily, or they might borrow that 1 million from other people and actually be paying a profit share on it. So this is a really good way of being able to scale your business quicker. So I just highlighted those numbers there on this page. But where it is really useful is the developer, let's say they want to graduate and to bigger sites, but no one's going to back them on a much bigger scheme. So this is a real example. So this developer had built 3 units, 4 units, then 8 units. We'd help with the funding, and now purchasing a site with planning for 42 units. Now, going from 8 units to 42 units is a huge jump, but most lenders will not back them on that because it's just seen as too big a jump. But
not without a main contractor of substantial standing and going independently to a third-party contractor.
Yeah,
that's.
But then that increase your costs as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot more margin in the contractor for, you know, they'll want, as Tim says, a tier 2 contractor that was going to bring with it a lot more like headline costs. So what we've done is we split it into a 20 and 22 unit scheme. We take a bridge against the second phase. We take a development loan against the first phase. So now lenders are looking at them graduating from 8 units to 20 units. That the lender's happy as well, because if they do it well, they have a free option because they're an incumbent lender to do the second phase. But if they don't think they've done a good job on phase 1, they can walk away. The developer could decide to sell phase 2 if they want. You know, so it just keeps you very flexible, but just reduces that minimum equity. So it just means that as a developer, you can get onto much bigger schemes. So, you know, the really good example, having conversations with these guys, you know, they'd seen this 42 unit scheme and they're just, oh, there's no way we could do that. There's no way we could do that. And actually, when you sit down and say, well, look, this is how you could potentially structure it, then all of a sudden light bulb goes on and they understand that actually this is something that can be done. So, you know, don't dismiss bigger schemes. You know, there are ways and means of getting to them. And definitely we can help with that.
But just be careful on phasing. They're often the infrastructure costs may be borne in phase 1, so that a heavy weighting of construction to phase 1, which makes phase 1 not as profitable as a standalone. It it's good to take advice. We're happy to offer, not advice, we don't give advice, we give recommendations, but it's very difficult to phase in. As my first bank manager ever told me, you can't phase a block of flats, but you can phase a housing estate. But most developers will tell you they want to work off the side, work their way out. If phase one is the back end, you've got to build the road that goes through phase two to get to phase one. These things, just think about, just bear in mind when you're looking at a phase scheme.
Yeah, so things like roads, drainage, that kind of thing, you know, have to be done for the whole site. So they can be more weighting. So these are lenders on the platform. I think this is slightly out of date. I think there's more to actually go on here, but it gives you a flavour of the kind of lenders that are on. These are some recent examples of where we've saved people money. So this is an example of a phase scheme where we reduced their deposit by 1.8 million. So they'd spoken, I think, to a lender who said, this is what you need to pay or put in. And actually they put in 900,000 of deposit in the end, whereas they'd been told that they needed to find 2.7 million. So this is one. It wasn't the one I was just talking about. This is actually another one where we structured it as we've just described. It was on a 63 unit scheme, and it just meant that the deposit was about a third of what they'd originally been told. So these are all sort of real life examples, and that is it for today. So thank you for joining.
We've had a number of questions. We had a number of questions through the session, which I've answered online and gone to all. I hope everyone's seen the answers. There's one question I hit the wrong button, which was an interesting general one about the Brickflow search engine, which said it would be useful if you put the postcode in, it drove you to the region, because regions are a bit of a grey area. We'll have a word without Mr. Robert on that. See if
no, it's actually something we've identified that needs to be done. But the thing is it takes a little bit of time to do these kind of things. So these are refinements, you know, as we progress. I mean, we're upgrading all the time. So there are you know, any 1 week or month there'll be numerous upgrades that go on the platform, and we'll try and keep you abreast of them. I'm just launching a poll here for everyone, if they could have a look at that and give us some feedback, that would be really good. It
was a good question. It was a good question, Ian. Your take on this as an introducer: why do lenders want hurt money? Surely they've got the value of the land as their security.
Well, okay, so the value of the land. I mean, if they're being asked to lend 100% of what the land is worth, then they're not going to do that, because, you know, in a situation where they have to realise the asset quickly, they're not going to be able to get their money back.
No, but they might be lending 70% of the value, but it's 100% of what you paid for it.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, the key thing is what this sort of changed really, and Tim probably saw this as well. But pre-financial crash 2008, you personal guarantees, recalls, they just weren't as commonplace as they are today. I mean, literally every single lender on Brickflow, and isn't just Brickflow, lenders that aren't on Brickflow will ask for recalls as standard. And by recalls, we mean a personal guarantee, a corporate guarantee, or, you know, some kind of charge over another asset, or some cash, or something like that, to give them the peace of mind that if costs overrun, then they're covered. Okay. That didn't always used to be the case. And what was happening in 2008 is when we had a massive devaluation of property prices, rather than developers working sites out, they were just throwing the keys back at the lender and saying, it's your problem. I haven't got a guarantee on this. You lent me 100% of value because I'd added value through the planning process. So, you know, you work it out. And actually someone I know who's a surveyor, who did a lot of workout business with various banks during the crash, and his job was to go through their list of developments that I had loans on and decide which ones were worth keeping, which ones they were going to have to take a loss on, and how much that loss was going to be. And the losses ran to, you know, tens, hundreds of millions of pounds. And it was because there was no hurt money and there was no recourse either. So, you know, this is why it's there, is developers got burned. You know, perhaps a few developers ruined it for everyone else. But like I say, rather than, you know, working these things out and you know, staying with the lender and agreeing to work them out for less money, they just threw the keys back at them. So that's why hurt money's in.
Last question, anonymous attendee. Welcome, anonymous attendee. Is it possible to white label the platform?
Yes, and it will be. That's an option that will be there shortly. So we're actually just building the functionality at the moment, but for advisors, yes, you'll be able to white label, and you'll have your branding instead of Brickflow branding across the platform.
Okay, I have no outstanding questions. If anybody wants, wants to raise any more.
What did we get on the polls? So we got, did you find tonight's session useful? Very useful, 83%. Somewhat useful, 17%. Right, people want to see real life analysis of Brickflow case studies, live demo of us going through the platform, and deal surgery are tying. If you've answered yes to would you like a demo of Brickflow, then we would have got your email address, so we'll be in touch on that probably tomorrow. And do you have any projects you are trying to fund at the moment, like someone from Brickflow to contact you? There's a few requests there, so again, we will contact you probably tomorrow now, just to take that forward for you. I thought I saw one more question pop up.
No, it was a thank you. It wasn't a question.
Okay, good.
But no, it's been good.
The feedback on the mic, I think it was my microphone rubbing on my nice woolly jumper. So that's what it was. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Tim.
No, it's been good. It's been a good session. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. We could talk for England on this, and we know you've got to get back to your partners and loved ones. So have a great evening, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow, those that need answers.
Brilliant. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.